have half an hour for questions, so please don't be shy and ask questions.
After what I said, you shouldn't censor yourself. Though if you throw something at me, the weak human sinner in me might throw something back. Yes, please.
Father, if Catechesis was so good, would there be a place now to re-establish the catechist, particularly for parishes where the priest doesn't speak very much English or hasn't had the education where some of his lay people have, so they could take that role, teach those who are coming in, teach those who ask questions, because you've got young people who know the faith, who are being turned to by people older than their own age children, who are asking because they know the answers, and they live the answers.
Remember how I said I became, de facto, a catechist. It was not a laying on of hands. It wasn't the ancient order of catechists. The bishop didn't clip my hair like he did when I became a reader or put his hands on me like subdeacon and so forth. But was I not doing the job? Long before I was a priest. Are there not women, pious Orthodox women, who do many of the tasks of the ancient order of deaconess? I see absolutely no reason why not to restore orders of an apostolic age that are confirmed in the canons. There is nothing against the tradition of restoring a ministry into the church in a formal way that in fact has always been going on in the life of the church anyway and is in no way contrary to the teaching of the church, but instead could be argued to be essential. So I would say yes. And maybe, if long ago in that very uninformed parish I grew up in Toronto, the bishop had laid a hand on me or clipped my hair or whatever to make me a catechist, perhaps I would have had more grace from the Holy Spirit than I had. But I tried my best, as we all do in any order, and God grant I gave glory to God. But it would also send a sign if certain orders that are enshrined in the holy tradition and serve the glory of God were restored. It would send a public sign that they're important. It would send a sign that ignorance is not acceptable, and that part of the apostolic ministry of the entire people of God is in fact sharing according to their station, according to their situation, that call to instruct the people in piety. Yes. Yes, please.
When you meet with people who don't necessarily want to embrace Orthodoxy, to convert to Orthodoxy, but would like to know more, you know they won't comply to your rules.
Of course.
But they would like to be instructed. They already have their spiritual home. But they don't want to remain ignorant. They want to know without necessarily changing their faith or their view. How do you talk about faith, about orthodoxy, knowing that you don't want them to convert you? You don't. You know they don't want to be converted, but of course well, I suppose for any of us it's pleasant when someone is interested in what we believe in. I mean, it's a joy to, even if you know that person is not ready, or at this time, at that step, is not willing to go to that path. This curiosity is at least something pleasing.
That's why I came in front of the speaker's podium rather than standing behind. Mm-hmm. Common See is issued to everybody without discrimination. I have a parish right in the middle of Zone 1 of London, right next to one of the biggest train stations and tube stations in the world, relatively speaking. Everybody can get there, and everybody does. And I have all kinds of people wandering through the door in various degrees of sobriety and income. And many of them are looking for something without even knowing that they're looking for something. And of course, if they don't disrupt the divine services, and they're polite and appropriate and such, of course they are welcome. But I don't tailor something especially for them when I am catechizing. And often, almost every Sunday, someone falls into some version of that category. They're just interested, they're just curious. Sometimes they've read a lot of books and they've never actually come and seen. And so I always invite them. I happen to be catechizing today. I am catechizing. I explain what that is, and I said, well, this is not meaning that you're committed to me or I'm committed to you. Premature. Sit in. But I'm not going to say anything or do anything especially for those people. If they come to my country, they will hear me speaking my language with my people. And I'm not going to continually speak a different language just because some people who don't speak the language happen to be present. And that is actually how I have many of my parishioners. Sometimes they just wandered in, and sometimes because I'm a very ill-tempered person, and I have health problems, and being a sinner, I can't support them very well. So my arthritis is bothering me, or I'm asthmatic. And I will just teach the people what I need to teach. And then by the grace of God, someone I didn't even know was there. I didn't even know that they were sitting and listening. God will do something with them. I don't need to specially tailor things. Yes? Yes, please.
How would you advise a couple, so he or she is Orthodox and he or she is not Orthodox, but they're very much in love, and the parents of he or she is saying, no, you're not supposed to be with her, you're not supposed to be with him, because he's not Orthodox, he's a Catholic, or he's Anglican, or he's Protestant, whatsoever. How would you advise that couple to start their life together and go in the faith of God?
This is not specifically on the technical topic of catechesis, but it falls within catechesis. Because all the proclamation of the truth to human beings could be said on some level to be catechesis. So I will answer very directly, and then commentary. This is the law, and now go and learn. That was Rabbi Akiva or some Jewish source. Yes, Rabbi Akiva. I have never done a mixed marriage. I don't intend to do a mixed marriage. And if my bishop tells me to do a mixed marriage, I will argue with my bishop. I don't approve of mixed marriages. The church allows mixed marriages, katikonomion, according to economy, but it is not the preferable state of life. Because what about the children? That things get a little complicated in a couple when children are on the way or possible. But Gregory of Nyssa says that the first trait that shows us we are made in the image and likeness of God is freedom. So I will not coerce. I will try to explain to the heterodox partner, and we're presuming that the person is baptized with water in the name of the Trinity, not a non-baptized person. A marriage between a member of the Orthodox Church and a non-baptized person cannot take place in church. That's a different kettle of fish than what you described. I will try to explain to this person what the Orthodox Church is, but they have to have the freedom whether they choose to pursue the path of becoming one in spirit with the one to whom they wish to be one in body. I will also explain to them that it's awkward being one in body and not being one in spirit. It's awkward having that wedge in a relationship. Believe me, I've tried. If I were your age, I might be inexperienced in various things, but I'm not. And I'm from a city, and many things happen in a city. So I want people to be free, but I want them to be informed. And so I guess that counseling falls under catechesis. Yes. Yes, please.
Not every parish has a Father Alexander Tefft.
Thank God, they like to change salvation.
It's more in the case that for someone who might have been Orthodox for many years, but has never really ever received any sort of instruction in the Orthodox faith, and a Father Alexander Tefft isn't particularly available for that particular person.
Especially if he has arthritis.
So he can't get around much. Yeah. How would you advise a member of the Orthodox Church who wishes to be catechized in their own faith?
It depends on the multiplicity of circumstances. I can't have one piece of advice for all the different circumstances in which such a person falls. So obviously some people live with no physical access to an Orthodox church or an Orthodox priest. Or they live with physical access to an Orthodox priest who won't or can't. Or they live in a parish or in which this doesn't even come up. And like those examples of both Philitism and pseudomorphosis, it doesn't even occur to them what they don't know. We didn't even know there was a Holy Spirit. But if they have access to someone who can catechize and has catechized, I would encourage them, especially if they're laity, and not tied to a diocese, not tied to a parish the way the clergy are, to come and see, to seek out a catechist. People seek out spiritual fathers. They don't automatically grow on trees and suddenly want a spiritual father. And up from the ground comes a spiritual father. People have gone to great lengths if they want something badly enough. Many of my parishioners, I will admit publicly, hot potato, have come from parishes and dioceses in which there is no such thing as catechesis or even the thought thereof. And they will seek, not necessarily me out, but they'll seek the parish out, usually because it serves in English and it's accessible and it's physically right next to a station, etc. And then they'll hear something. But I want to address the earlier implication in what you asked. It's never too late. When I started doing this 26 years ago, I had two Russian babushki, the two grannies, in my parish, and one of them could barely read and write, and after all the years of living in Canada, her English was very poor, and she came up to me after one of my catechetical talks, and she says, "Alexander, I am simple woman. I do not understand. I am not intelligent woman, but I love what you say, and I said, Valentina Ignatievna, or whatever which was, you are intelligent if you want to learn, and you are stupid if you don't. I know all kinds of pig ignorant academics. God, I do. And let this be on the record. And I know all kinds of people who think they don't understand things because they don't have the formal qualification. Oh, for God's sake. But they have the burning curiosity, and their hearts are alive, and they want to understand the things because they love God. Not because they want a degree, because they love God. And if you love someone, you want to understand as much as you can to live with this person, to have the relationship with this person. Now that is a very good possible catechumen, even at 85. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Isn't part of the problem of the lack of catechism in the church is that the church doesn't really have a unified voice on a lot of issues? I mean, as a convert, that's something that I found particularly annoying at times. So one example would be the issue of baptism. Someone will be like, oh, you have to be baptized because it was done by a heterodox, and we'll be like, no, you just received by chrismation. So it's hard to be catechizing people when a lot of times you have to say, well, the Orthodox Church doesn't really have an answer on that, so isn't it the church's fault?
Answer A. Militism.
Yes.
Obviously, if you're committed to being stupid, you're going to commit other people to being stupid. Because the blind, leading the blind, fall into the ditch. On the question of local discipline, I do not want to encourage people to go against their parish priest and his diocesan bishop. I do not want to encourage schism, internal or external, in the church. But I want to encourage people to understand. And to understand why, in that little corner of the Orthodox Church, things are done in a certain way. And whether they're right or wrong, and who you complain to, is beyond the question of understanding why. I am not pointing out political courses of action, but asking that you not be a rock, and that you actually, as a human being, understand why. There are all sorts of things in the Orthodox Church that are not done according to the tradition, because we are human and we're part of history, and things have happened. Also, we are very traumatized people, the Orthodox people. History has not been kind to us, especially in the second millennium, and we found all sorts of ways of adapting ourselves to situations. But understand why. Even if you're in a situation where there's a problem and you know it's wrong and you can't really do anything about it without stirring people to rebellion, at least understand why. And you might find a way around this in conscience. I'm not going to address particular questions like how to receive, etc., because this is beyond the question of catechesis. I answered in this hall when someone from this floor said, "Well, Father, I go to a parish and I don't understand a word of what is said. I understand nothing what's going on. How important is it to understand the words? It isn't important to understand the words. I get a lot of it without understanding the words." And I said, "Well, why are there words?" And then when he said he was in a situation where I knew it was not going to be in English, I said, "Then learn the language. Then get a text. You're a human being. You owe it to yourself to do the best you can to understand something. Why do you think John Chrysostom wrote the Divine Liturgy? He wasn't going, they're words. There are meaningful actions. Do your best to try to understand according to your circumstances." And I guess that is what I say, according to your circumstances. Yes? Yes, please.
You spoke about the person who can take the role of the catechist. One thing that comes to my mind is where before Jesus started preaching to the people and to the masses, he had to undergo his own struggle, his own temptation, and I just think that we've got to be very careful. This is my own humble opinion, is that we don't go out catechizing before we're ready to catechize.
Absolutely.
So then how do we, and for me, because my job is I'm a teacher,
Yeah.
so from an academic point of view, I
Yeah.
know that I can't teach my children maths without having first done maths. So in other words, I think it takes it, you've got to be given the go-ahead. All right, I got a PGCE to become a teacher. There's no qualification that says you're ready now to be a catechist.
Exactly.
But I do think that I helped to run a Sunday school, but it was my spiritual father that gave me the blessing to do that. And through my spiritual father, where I was catechized in a sense, even though I was what you would call cradle Orthodox.
So am I. There are plenty of catechized cradle.
Yeah,
anyway.
but I wasn't taught about the faith. If anything, the things that I knew about the faith completely got shattered once I was catechized.
Indeed. You brought up two extremely important points, and the simplest way I put it is, I'm not talking about you going and doing it until you've received it. I'm not talking about putting someone behind the wheel of a car who's never learned to drive. I'm not talking about teaching children the ABCs if you yourself don't know the ABCs. You can't give what you don't have. But the same principle applies. Then, if you're going to undertake the teaching of someone, you better know what you're teaching. Someone better teach you. This is where the blind leading the blind problem. The assumption. I have to endure Cambridge periodically. And there is an assumption in universities that a person with a PhD can teach. What do the two things have in common? I mean, that one thing has nothing logically to do with the other one. There's another assumption that if you were a member of the Orthodox Church, you can teach the Orthodox faith. What if you don't know the Orthodox faith? You are not qualified to give what no one has given to you. So we have to be very careful indeed. But you touched on something very important when you first began. I couldn't do this. I would never have been able to do this if I hadn't gone through the degree given to me of carrying my cross. If I hadn't gone through the ascetical struggle, not in the conventional, external, or monastic, or whatever. I'm not talking about things. I'm talking about what enables you to sacrifice. Because catechesis is sacrifice. So yes, you can't give what you don't have. Let us start to enable people to have something so that they can give it. One other.
So
yes?
just to go back on that,
Oh, yeah.
I've also got friends who are priests and who are, you know, in parishes, and from the other side, they're so humble that they dare not speak because they fear of saying something wrong. Now, that's not necessarily a quality that I can knock, because we want priests that are humble. We don't want priests that are going to go around and, you know, look at me, I'm a big shot and all this. No, we want people that understand the faith and that live it rather than, you know. So how do we then kind of encourage these good priests to speak?
Are you humble? Are you too humble to love your children? Are you too humble to answer your questions? Are you too humble to try to find reasonable answers based on experience to answer questions? There is a danger in confusing humility with lack of knowledge of the faith. There are humble priests and bishops I know who are remarkably scholarly, who have remarkable minds, but they use what God has given them for the salvation of the people of God. There's not a dichotomy between spiritual life and knowing the faith, as though, oh my God, he's literate, he must be a wicked person. You know, or, oh my God, he can't read and write, he must be a saint. You know, this is not an illiterate man, and certainly St. John Chrysostom's enemies called him arrogant and presumptuous, and St. Basil's enemies said he dips into pagan learning, he's not faithful to Christ, and so when he died, his best friend, St. Gregory the theologian, said, only those who try to hide their ignorance would accuse the great Basil of not loving Christ because he knows things that the pagans know. He knows things that the pagans know in order to refute error, in order to proclaim truth. But yes, there will always be priests and others who don't have the circumstances in life to acquire a lot of knowledge about the faith. But they must be counterbalanced by people in battlefield situations who are trained in battle, who know what the precise enemy is. And the precise enemy, who is always the evil one, the father of lies, does not only attack through the logismi, the thoughts, he also attacks through ignorance. I told you what those three fathers compared catechesis in some form to exorcism, to driving out the spirit of ignorance. They're not one or the other. Again, I'm not going to point to someone and say, he is humble, he's proud. I don't know that. And I'm not going to stoop to cheap stereotypes from folk religion. But we are also, and this is an important point, we are living in a society where the internet can reach everywhere, where people can get misinformation more easily than they ever have in the history of mankind. And we owe it to the people of God not to simply live in a village before newspapers were invented. We owe them to be able, just like the fathers of the 4th century and beyond, if we are given by God the ability to speak with a mouth of gold, or the ability to debate with the pagans, we must do so for the same reason that humble monk or that humble priest who can't read and write battles with his prayer. It is the same battle.
If there's any question, shoot very quickly now. Unfortunately, it's 9 o'clock, so we have to prepare ourselves for the
is there anybody who has a question who hasn't already asked? And if not, Sasha.
Yes.
Yeah? No? Sasha?
Okay. Another form of catechesis for the sponsors, the godfather, godmother. Because it rings a bell when I hear you can't give what you don't have. And the problem is, I wouldn't say I don't have, but I have very little. And I would be glad to share the very little I have. But first, I wouldn't like to think I give them things that actually I don't have. And I don't want to be pushy. I would like my goddaughters to feel at home in church. I would like them to know that I'm available. and I probably need to learn more in order to give more. So
we all do.
So the question is, not being part of the order, how to do with this, considering they're different, they're in different places. But yes, I don't want to be just baptism.
Just a rock.
Indeed.
Well, it's like Michael's question. It depends on your circumstances and what is available to you. There is not some simple door, and if you can only emigrate to the country and find the house, find the door and open it, you go through, and all these situations are solved, and everybody knows exactly what they need to know about the faith. The faith is not reducible to one of those catechism manuals. That was my point. And you gather from any source you can. The important thing is not that you have X amount of exact knowledge from A to Z, and there is nothing beyond that, and there's nothing less than that, and that's mechanical. But you have to want to know, and you have to try the best under your circumstances to try to understand, especially if you have people dependent on you. What parent loves their child and makes no effort to teach their child how to walk? What parent loves their child and just lets the child lie all day in the crib and feeds them poor food and doesn't even make the effort to learn how to care for that child? Obviously, not everybody has to be, St. John Chrysostom, whatever. But you do have to want to be able to share love in that way. Because what we are talking about is sharing Christ. So, again, you have to find what is available under your circumstances, but some people will make great sacrifices to find someone or ones who can give them what they need to take care of those entrusted to their care. Is that it? Okay. Thank you for your great patience.
Thank you very much.
Christ is risen!